Jazakallah khair for that. So as we move on with our Remembering the Srebrenica Genocide webinar, we're joined by some people live on Facebook. We'll also be putting the recording out, inshallah, and we'll be putting out the recording out as a podcast as well on the Middle West podcast. I want to start off by introducing our guests. We really appreciate all of you coming on, making the time. The 11th of July and the time around it, the month of July is a really busy time for most of you guys, for speakers, as it's as we build up to remembering Srebrenica, the genocide. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time out to come and be with us and enrich us with your experiences. Um, we have with us four panelists today. Our first panelist is Nijad Avdic. He is again from Bosnia and based in Bosnia at the moment. He was very personally involved because he was actually shot during the genocide. He was only 17 at the time, and he's an activist, and he's dedicated his life to raising awareness of this and to telling people around the world the story of what happened in Bosnia. So Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for joining, Nijad. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for
Um,
calling me for the invitation to
no, really,
join.
really appreciate it. Our second speaker is our very own Imam Mirsad Karnic. He's from Birmingham now, mashallah. He's one of our own, and he has been a supporter of Mab Youth in the past. He's part of the Remembering Srebrenica organization here in the UK, and he's been very active with that. And again, Mirsad, thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us. Salam alaikum, welcome.
Welcome, Salam. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We also have with us Melissa Shigonia Piato from the central part of Bosnia. She actually lives in Sarajevo right now, but she was born in Travnik. She's done a lot of work with youth around the country in Bosnia, and she's again delivered sessions around the world. Shared insights from reports on what the Srebrenica genocide meant, and we'll be hearing from her more on the impact to the youth and some of the things that they're doing to kind of tackle the legacy that this horrible event and this horrible genocide left to the people of Bosnia. So, Melissa, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We also have with us an imam from Bosnia, Imam Ahmed Hrustanovic. He's a survivor as well. He's lost members of his own direct family to the genocide and escaped narrowly with his own life. And again, he is a community leader in Bosnia, and he works with people from all backgrounds. Again, supporting them through the legacy of what this has left us, and we'll be hearing about his experience as well. So Ahmed, welcome and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, really.
Thank you. I wanted to start off by putting the question to you, Imam Mirza, to kind of take us through a little bit of a background of what actually happened from a historical perspective, and to give us a little bit of a background to set the scene for us, and to tell us about the what happened, kind of the actual events that happened, and then what kind of the aftermath has been like, and the Remembering Srebrenica organization.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The genocide in Bosnia, first of all, it's important to mention that it wasn't the first genocide in Bosnian history. It was actually a 10th genocide. This genocide didn't happen just overnight. This genocide was carefully planned for years, especially after the period of the Second World War. It's interesting that there was a whole, shall we say, army of writers who wanted to keep a flame of hatred against Muslims alive. So very often they would write about Ottoman history, where they would write about alleged crimes against Serbs that were committed by Turks. So very often they refer the Bosnian Muslims as a Turks. Why did they do that? Firstly, because of the fact that Ottoman Empire was in Bosnia for approximately 500 years. So they misused historical facts, or they fabricated historical facts in order uh, to keep hatred against Bosnian Muslims alive. Um, there was so this was the plan of the neighboring countries, Serbia and Croatia, because for centuries they always had territorial aspirations against Bosnia, because Bosnia is surrounded by Serbia and Croatia. So there was a famous historical meeting in Karađorđevo where Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, who, by the way, was convicted war criminal, and he died in a tribunal in Hague. And the Croatian President Franjo Tuđman, they had agreement to divide Bosnia. So that was a plan to establish greater Serbia and even greater Croatia. The only question was what to do with Bosnian Muslims. Sometimes famously they said that they will pretend that they don't even exist, but that wasn't possible because there were more than 2 million Muslims in Bosnia at the time. So they had a plan to kill or exterminate one third of Bosnian Muslims, one third to force them to convert into Christianity, and one third to simply to expel them from Bosnia or to make them refugees. In the beginning of the 90s, at that time, Yugoslavian People Army was one of the strongest army forces in Europe, and that army overnight became a Serbian army, ready to execute a political plan to divide Bosnia and to commit genocide against Bosnian Muslims, and they were ready. They were ready to start with a policy of ethnic cleansing, mass murdering, mass rape, and they also set up concentration camps. I think also it's very important to say that unfortunately the figure of more than 8,000 people, Bosnian Muslims killed in Srebrenica, is actually much higher when we take all cities in Bosnia. The official figure is approximately 100,000 people were killed. But Srebrenica is a specific case because only in 4 days more than 8,000 Bosnian men and boys were killed. So situation wasn't very easy for Bosnian Muslims to defend themselves, because they were not prepared for the war and they didn't want a war. So in the early aggression, it's the exact and only correct term is aggression on Bosnia. So very often you might find in literature or even in media like civil war. No, it wasn't a war. It wasn't civil war. It was aggression of Serbia against Bosnia. So that's very clear. Also, the other figure of the raped women is approximately, this is between 20 and 50,000 raped women. what is also interesting to say that Srebrenica genocide happened in 95, and war in Bosnia started in 92. Very large part of Bosnia was already ethnically cleansed, and genocide had been already committed in the other parts of Bosnia. So for everyone, especially for the UN um, and the world politicians, it was clear that this genocide is coming. So it was easy to predict. Even war criminal Ratko Mladic openly expressed his intentions. What will happen if Serbian army coming into Srebrenica? And the UN had a rather strange and ineffective policy where they said that we are in Bosnia or in Srebrenica to keep the peace, not to enforce it, which on the ground wasn't very useful, and therefore they were not able to protect and defend civilians in Srebrenica. I will just quickly explain how that in this year more than 1,000 there were more than 1,000 events in this country in the UK. So which are organized mainly organized by organization remembering Srebrenica, which I've been board member and activist of this organization for many years. And this is something that encouraged all of us that we have to stand up against intolerance because hatred exactly led to genocide in Bosnia, and therefore we have to clearly stand up against this negative trend that unfortunately is becoming very popular, not only in Europe but in the whole world, because as we can see that there is a rise of far right and the other negative ways of dealing with actually with neighbors. So this is something that we cannot accept. And in the end, I would just like to say that is very important that in Bosnia, Bosnian Muslims for centuries they terrible injustice happened to them. They suffered a lot, but they never believed in revenge nor hatred. And even in the most difficult times in Bosnia during the war, while others were destroying while others were destroying mosques and killing Bosnian Muslims, in the same time, Bosnian Muslims guarded and protected churches. So that speaks for itself enough. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I was expected.
No, yeah, no, I think really appreciate that, and I think there's a lot of questions that we're going to address to you about the activities of the Remembering Srebrenica charity. But I think that was a really good overview for our guests who might have been hearing about this or not have read about this previously enough. So a kind of a background into what actually happened in the war. So the focus, actually, we focus a lot on Srebrenica, which was 8,000 probably more people. But actually around Bosnia, and the war happened in many other areas. There were 6 protected enclaves at the time. Srebrenica was just one of them. But all over Bosnia, and as you said, the stats were around 100,000 plus. So really appreciate your background. I wanted to move into our next panelist and discuss it more from a personal experience of what it was like on the ground, and but also what kind of it left you with, and how do you get up and pick up from something like that. So our next speaker, Nijad, who is a survivor who actually went through it himself and was actually shot as well. And again, that's a tremendously traumatic experience that for many of our listeners is so difficult to grasp and understand. So Nijad, if you could please share some of your experiences with the genocide.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I will try. July, that bloody July happened at the very end of the Bosnian War, when we all expected the peace and peaceful solution of Bosnian came the Srebrenica and the final act. In fact, the final act of the Bosnian genocide. Yeah, genocide couldn't happen, couldn't start, and couldn't happen in just 1 week of July. That, as Merced said, that started just 3 years ago at the very beginning of the war. And I will return now to my experience. And at the time, I lived in Srebrenica, and in fact, I arrived with my family there, with my father, my 3 sisters, my mother, and other relatives, and we were a refugee in Srebrenica from March 1993 until the July. And the UN forces came there to Srebrenica, and we expected that they came there to protect us or to help us, and we thought that finally civilized war could see what was going on. And but unfortunately, they came just to observe our tragedy. And I have to repeat that they just helped Serb forces to occupy Srebrenica, and we were handed over to Serb forces. I remember that I live in the camp at that moment. I started with my school, but the Serb offensive interrupted all that. And as the Srebrenica was our last refuge, we didn't know where to go again, because we were hiding in the forest, in the different villages, and in the end we tried to find shelter in Srebrenica. And now that moment came when we had to decide where to go, but we hadn't idea where to go again. We were hiding in the forest for a few days, and I decided to join the column of men and boys. That column wanted to reach the Tuzla city, to reach the Bosnian territory, the territory which was under Bosnian government control. My mother and my sisters, who were smaller, who was younger, they couldn't take so long walk, and they decided to go to the base. My father decided to join the column, and it was a question for me at that moment. And I remember that my father said to me, "It's up to you to decide where to go." And because I was at the age of 17 years old at the time, and I could be target for the forces to be captured or to be killed. And I remember that I lost my father immediately before the column was formed in the hills 20 kilometers far from Srebrenica, because of a chaotic situation, because of shelling, of bombardment. I lost my father, and I found myself in the mass of many people, and many, if I can say so, strangers, and I didn't know anyone. But I kept walking, and in the end, in the end, in the end of the column, it was back part of the column between 1,000 and 2,000 men and boys, some small a number of women and then children, and we start walking, and all the time was shelling, and many people were wounded, and in one moment the column was cut, and I was captured by forces and police officers, and I remember that I remember the words when we were called over megaphone to get out, to surrender, to leave the forest, but we had a fear for our life, and we didn't want to get out, to surrender. In the end, when they promised life to us, when they said that, we started to leave the forest, and carrying some of wounded people. But I remember the words which they mention, uh, which they mentioned at that moment. They were saying about the Geneva Conventions, and etc., that we would be treated according to all the Geneva Conventions, and I remember that words very well. It was 13th of July when we was on the asphalt road, and soon after that we were put on one meadow when the Serb units, the forces came there, and lot of tanks, other vehicles on wheels, and lots of soldiers were there, and I remember that we put our wounded friends in front of us, and one of the soldiers started the talk, and he had a speech there in front of us, saying something to that effect, that we, in fact, I believe he used this word. We are from Serbia, and you can see these wounded people, these wounded your friends, and if you had surrendered earlier, they wouldn't be wounded, and but don't worry. Anyway, no one will disturb you. You will be with your families in the following days, and but this night, this evening, you will be present in the hangars in Bratunac town, without dinner, without food, and I could feel irony in his voice, and sarcasm, and because he knew what was going on with us, and he had planned for us. And soon after that, we were loaded onto trucks, and the column of the trucks was going into direction of Bratunac, and we spent that night in Bratunac town, and I remember that people were calling for water, for please give us some water, please give us some water. I remember the voices, and but Serb soldiers were very cruel toward us. They would curse, and Balia mother, we will kill you. Just stop, don't shouting, Balias. And I remember that we spent that night on trucks, and the next morning, the column of trucks started their raid in the direction of town of Zvornik. At that moment, I didn't know where they go. We talked on the truck. That we asked, in fact, where we could ended up, where we could finish. In fact, and I remember that people noticed the Dutch vehicle of UN forces, and they hoped that we could be saved, but we have to know that Serb forces misused or used Dutch vehicles. In fact, they wanted to catch us in easier way. In that way, using that cars and that equipment, and after that, I remember that the column was somewhere in the suburb of town of Bratunac, and every one of the inhabitants could recognize us, could see us on the tracks, because we were recognizable. We were dirty. We were without proper clothes, and etc. etc. And in one moment, I remember that they decided to close the canvas on the truck, and they said to us they will do it because of our safety. And when they closed that, the people on the truck started suffocated. We were suffocating there. We left without oxygen, and you can imagine the temperature, how high temperature is in July outside, but on the truck we cannot imagine. I just remember that I found a small hole on the canvas, and I was looking through, and I followed the direction of moving of the trucks, and in one moment I could see the children were driving bicycles beside us, and that is a very sad moment in that I could see such things around us. As I were with my friends on the truck, we were taken to the death, but children were driving bicycles freely around, and that moment I I can never forget, and that shows for itself in the circumstances were in. And the columns kept moving, and that afternoon the trucks and the buses stopped in one moment in front of the one building. It was later I will see it was a school in a village of Serb village of Petkovci, near town of Vornik. 50 or 60 kilometers from Srebrenica, and no one of us could imagine what they planned. In fact, it showed that we would be imprisoned in a concentration camp, be taken and handed over to our families. So people think like in that way. It was logical to think in that way, because no one could imagine that they could kill us if they want to
Lijat, sorry,
us.
your volume has dropped quite a lot.
Good now, can you hear me?
It's very, very quiet.
It's very quiet. Can you hear me now? It's now clear.
Yes, now it's better. Now it's better, yeah.
Okay. Stable, yeah. And this one moment, I just remember that we're dying.
Yeah, I think, sorry, it's dropped out again. I think we got kind of to the point where you talked about the trucks going, and nobody could imagine what they were planning to do. And sorry, if you try to say something now.
Can you?
Sorry, no, I can't hear you again. Yes, now it's okay. Now it's okay. I think the thing I was wondering about was, how did you make it out of there alive from that marching column?
Yeah, and we started asking them, please give us some water, please give us some water, don't kill us, because it was unbearable for us to be on the truck. And soon after that, they opened the rear part of the truck, and we were jumping out, and they started the torture. Then they were beating us, every one of us, was forced to stand in front of the main door and to receive the portion of beats. And I remember that one guy, that one prisoner in front of me was beaten almost to death, and in that moments, because of him, probably I entered school. I entered the school, but soldiers were waiting for me there and for us there, and one of them said, he put question in one moment, and providing the answer immediately. He was saying, who is this land, Balias? Who is this land? Providing answer at the same time. This is Serb land, always was and always will be. And we were forced to repeat it, that words. This is Serb land, always was and always will be. Also for Srebrenica, we were forced to say Srebrenica is Serbian, always was and always will be, all together in the choir. And later I was imprisoned in the last classroom or one classroom before that. I don't remember exactly. But we were packed in the classroom. So many people were there, and soon after that we left without oxygen again. People drank their own urine, and because we were without water for days, and it was July, very hot, and weather in Bosnia, and we were dying, and someone tried to open the windows, and they started they opened fire, and all the windows were broken at that moment. And I just remember the traces of the bullets which were hitting everywhere and on the ceiling, and I was waiting for one to come and hit me, and one guy, my neighbor, my acquaintance, was hit in his neck. He was bleeding at that moment. He was crying, uh, asking for help, but no one could help him at that moment. And soon after that, they started with the killing, and all the time I could hear the orders to the prisoners, to the people to leave the school in group of five, or sometimes three, sometimes two, and I could hear voices and screaming outside the classroom and in the hall, and soon after that, shooting and firing, and that lasted for constantly until midnight, when my turn came. And I remember in one moment that people were saying, they are killing people, we should jump out, uh, otherwise they would kill all of us. We should do something to this, at least some of us could survive, and but other were not ready to accept that fact, that they were to be killed very soon. Many of them couldn't accept that moment, couldn't accept that fact, that they deal with that. Um, it is difficult to explain,
Of
psychologically
course.
to explain that moments, and no one could understand that situation.
Yes,
And
no, definitely. And I mean, we really appreciate you sharing it. It kind of been easy for you to talk about this such a traumatic experience, and we really appreciate you kind of taking us through it. No one should have to make a choice like you had to about what to do to save your own life, whether to go um, on this side or that with your with either of your parents, and no one should have to make a choice to have to jump out of a window to save themselves, or some of the scenes that you described, and the fact that a lot of these people were from the community, and the things that they made you say. We really appreciate. No one should have to go through this, but we really appreciate you being so open and sharing your experience with us. And it's something that sadly many of us sometimes don't even know the details of what happened in Bosnia. So we really appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to kind of go on from there, and it's hard to move on from that. And that's my question is, Melissa, you have kind of you have a lot of experience working with youth in the aftermath of the war. You kind of have worked with Bosnian youth now, and how do people move on from that? Like, are the divisions still there in the society? How does a new generation plan to build and move forward from that? And how do you personally see Bosnia and Herzegovina? Where do you or how do you see the people moving on from that, moving past that, and forging a society that works better for everyone? And how do you see your place in the global community as well, after all that you've been through?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you as a organization for giving us the opportunity to share our stories. That means a lot. So the world can hear the truth, the real truth of what happened here. And the second of all, I would like to thank to all the participants to this webinar who are willing to learn and to learn from experience of Bosnia and Herzegovina, so they can prevent happening the same things to their communities and as well all over the world, since genocide could be stopped in every of its phases. But I will come to that, inshallah, later on. So you've asked me how are we moving forward. But before that, I would like to share just a bit of my personal story, because I'm not from Srebrenica. I'm not from that part of Bosnia, but from central part of Bosnia. And I was 4 years old when the war started, and my first experience was very painful as well. I actually, first memories when a child gets are in that years. I had 4 years, as I said, and in that period, I remember air bombing around my house, of a factory of ammunition and weapons that was production there, and my father was working there as well. And the sound of that bombs and that airplanes that were surrounding my house was something I will never forget. And even now, when I hear a plane, it triggers some memories. The other painful memory from that period of me as a child was unfortunately, but smell of a burning house, because my house was first of the burned in my neighborhood, because my father was one of the people who was really trying to stay against the occupators and aggressors to Bosnia and Herzegovina. That was like an act of revenge towards my family. Then I remember a situation when our mother took a mattress and put it on my sister and me, and to prevent us from bullets. So the war in Bosnia didn't start just by some Serbs who wanted to, as Imam Kalish said, it didn't start because they didn't plan it. It was planned and very well organized a lot before than actually these atrocities in all Bosnia happened. Even though we have those painful memories, and even though my first day at school was learning how to hide from grenades, we as human beings have this incredible capacity and ability to overcome those memories. And we have the ability to rewrite our own narratives. So I'm always focusing on that we are, no matter what happened to us, that we are winners. And I'm trying to transfer that to youth in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to people who I'm working with. The fact that we are still able to walk the streets and to see perpetrators of those monstrous acts I think that that is a lifestyle of winner, because the goal was to exterminate people, not just in Srebrenica, but in all Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we have survived. What is more to ask? They didn't. They didn't manage, even though they could. They did, unfortunately, a very good job, but they didn't manage to destroy us. Unfortunately, Bosnia and Herzegovina was created in a very unsustainable way. The Dayton Peace Agreement, which stopped the war, 1995, made Bosnia like an unfunctional state. So now we are facing a lot of challenges to make it functional again. Our work, because I'm here, as you said, I was working with youth, and our work in our organization, AFAS, which organize a few different organizations from all over Bosnia. We're trying to work with youth, with children, but also with people who are working class and who have already their families, and to share some values and to share some skills so they can stay here and develop this country. Because the idea isn't now that to the idea is now to finish what they couldn't do with the genocide. So the idea now is to just make it impossible to live here, so everyone would go. When you come to Bosnia, you will see that this is a beautiful country, a lot of natural beauties, and when you see our shopping malls, everything is like very modern and very popular. And when you come here, you wouldn't say never that this is a third world country, as many of the international communities say. But unfortunately, the education and health and everything that is like a concept of dignified life here isn't on a big level. So what am I trying to say? That the things that weren't finished with, weren't done with genocide, they are now trying to be done in these peace occasions, because every effort we try to make is in some way ruined. I also try to emphasize to people that I'm working with that we shouldn't be naive, because genocide, as I mentioned at the beginning, isn't an event that happens overnight. It is a planned and very well planned operation, which needs, for some examples, for many years. When you take, for example, genocide that happened to Myanmar Muslims, the first phase of that genocide happened in 1982, when the people started to be classified as them and our, we and them. So the very beginning, when you separate communities, communities from, as I said, on us and you, then we're trying to, as we had the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we're always told that we are Turks, not Bosnians, not Bosnian Muslims, not Bosniaks, but Turks. So they have separating us for many years, and they're preparing it. So as I was saying, we shouldn't be naive. Now we are in a phase of 10. I recommend everyone who is watching this to check that 10 phases of genocide and to read, to try to see, can they see those elements anywhere in the world right now? And they would be so surprised when they see how many elements of committing a genocide that isn't committed yet are now in some of those phases. So we, as people who are not in that process right now, we could make some pressure to international community to stop genocide, to prevent genocide that could be happening somewhere in the world in this very moment. And that is something that we as Bosnians can now learn other people. They can learn from our very painful experience, and to inshallah prevent such events in somewhere in the world.
No, really, I think that's a very kind of positive outtake of what you seek to implement from the experiences that you've had. I wanted to move on to our next speaker to kind of again bring this as you're a community leader, and some of the things that Nija talks about in terms of Serbs who used to be our neighbors, making you say things like this land is Serbian land, and how do you move from the fact that there was this profound sense of betrayal because the peacekeeping forces from the UN came and literally just watched this happen. Airstrikes that were promised by NATO, and the UK is complicit in this along with the US and France. in allowing this to happen, because the airstrikes just never materialized. How do you kind of bring your community together to have a sense of belonging to this nation, but also to kind of Europe, and to just move on in life? How do you steer your community around, to move past this, to move past the profound traumas? Because we've discussed some of the trauma that Nija talked about, but there was a lot of crimes against women that happened as well. And again, how does someone, this is life altering trauma, so how do you steer your community to move past that and to navigate it?
First of all, thank you for opportunity to speak with you, and I'm very happy that Najad was tonight with us, really. But I would like, if we have time, for Najad to finish his story, really. For me and for our community, the most important thing in our lives is our faith. You know, it's our faith, Islam, and we take strength from our faith. Really, nothing else matters. It's when we recitate Quran and we understand that we have one ayah. It's talking about that our shaheeds are not dead; they are alive, but we don't see that. And in the beginning, Amar states those ayats from Surah Buruj. We know that same happened in Yemen. You know, when our people were killed because just they were Muslim, they were mu'mins. Same happened here in Srebrenica. We were killed because just we are Muslims. We have different names, we have different tradition, we have different culture, because of hatred, because of predictions, because of not knowing each other, maybe a lot, because of not teaching a lot about different religion, about different tradition. Genocide happened.
I so another kind of point that I wanted to raise with you was about the community that you kind of lead in Bosnia. What sorts of things do you try to do to make them feel a part of the community, but also part of the country as a project, but also as and I guess this comes down to a feeling of identity, and feeling part of the neighboring countries, and feeling a part of Europe, when Europe as a project profoundly let down the Bosnian people.
I'm here in Srebrenica, as you know, and this is a very small community right now, and for us, it's we can understand that someone can accept us just because we are Muslims. Really, it's impossible to understand that, and but we face every Muslim face with that in Europe right now. Same happening here, there in UK. I know that really. Same happening in France and in Belgium, even in German. But we have to stop that. We have to stand up for that, to speak against that really, because we speak about that here. We fight for justice. We fight for our future. Really, we are trying to do that, but it's very hard, really. But when you have denial, when you have uh, people that they are still thinking that Ratko Mladic is his hero, you know, is their hero, you know, and it's very hard, but we are trying to do our best to understand everything what's happening around us.
Last, I guess, I think we'll open it to the floor. But I had one question to ask all of our panel of speakers, which is about the International Court of Justice, which tried a lot of the high-ranking people like Mladic, and tried them and gave them gave them a sentencing, or a life sentence, and kind of tried them for their war crimes, and accepted that it was a genocidal activity. Does that even register for you? Because of course it can never be enough to move you past your trauma, but does that even register as a something important for you, or do you think this is or does it feel to you, as well as to people in your community, as like a tick box exercise, that was just a kind of a feel good for everyone around? And
I'd like
I
to
think
say something personal. Imam Mokranich, he told us that this is not the first time that the genocide happened. So where are those people who died in generations, grandfathers and people who died in the previous genocides? So this is the first time that was actually recognized internationally. It was this is the most positive thing that could happen in these when you're trying to find something positive that happened during that with the work of that international court. So many people that I know didn't find my friends didn't find their grandparents or someone from their family. They were just lost when they were explaining where are they. They were just lost. No one did any research about what happened to them because in previous country it wasn't very popular to investigate those crimes and actually genocides, to call it with right name.
I think Imam Ahmed, you were saying something.
I will let that question for Nejat.
Yeah, I will say, from my point of view, as a direct victim, as a survivor, I'm not satisfied with many judgments. I'm disappointed with many of them. But as Melissa said, it was for the first time that the genocide and such crime was internationally recognized. And because of that, today we have international judgments, and we must start from somewhere, and that judgments can be the base, and they are the most they are the closest to the truth, to the truth, and we have to start from them, using them as a base. Without that, without accepting international judgments, without accepting that facts, reconciliation is not possible. But when we talk about justice, justice is a relative thing. For me personally, if they decided to kill General Mladic Day in The Hague, that doesn't mean anything for me, because nothing can return my killed father, my killed uncles, my neighbors, my friends, my schoolmates, my destroyed our village, our community. Not only that they kill people, they kill the sport, they killed everything here, and that is problem. And international community left us here alone to fight against the deniers and those who support the genocide, who take the war criminals, convicted war criminals, for heroes, and they left us alone here to fight against that. It is not correct. International community stopped the war. They established the ICTY and some of the most significant international judgments made, but it wasn't enough. If the legacy will be left on the terrain here in Bosnia, we can put question to ourselves: where is the sense? What is the point of the justice? For example, if someone steal our car, or he will be maybe charged and sent to prison, but but he will continue to use our car. That is very simplified.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that with the existence of or the way the country was set up. I think Melissa, you mentioned this to an extent, and do you think that Bosnians subscribe to the kind of the vision that originally Izetbegovic had of a unified pluralist Bosnia, or do you think that this is kind of a there's too many nails in this coffin to bring it back? Sorry, I think you're on mute. Sorry, Osama, we might need your help on this. Right.
Please put question again, and we'll.
If you allow me, I can just give my reply.
Yeah, please go for it. Well, we can try and sort out Melissa's mic in the back.
Yeah. Please, but can you repeat the question, because it is put to Melissa and didn't understand.
Yeah. So the question was what many have perceived. By the way, this is one of the audience questions. Is that there was what originally was described as the Bosnia of Ali Izetbegovic's its ideal was a unified pluralist Bosnia where all the people would come together and live peacefully side by side. And do you think that this is something that even remotely can still happen, or do you think we've moved too far from that?
No, it is far from that point, but it is not far because of those who like Bosnia. But you know, aggression happened here, and the Bosnian war was a war for territories, and Bosnia is totally destroyed and totally divided, and because of that, it is very difficult to rebuild it, to be rebuilt again. But ordinary people, more and more, they meet and they talk, and if we wanna in one moment imagine our country without politicians who caused further divisions, ordinary people would very, very fast create it and establish such country as you mentioned, as you have mentioned.
Okay, another question from the audience was on directed to Mirsad is how can, I mean, of course, anyone else, please feel free to jump in as well. So how can the international community, including youth in the UK, support Bosnians and support the cause? What can we do, and what's the most effective tool that matters right now?
At the moment, I think it's important to raise awareness. It's important that the children learn in a school about genocide in Bosnia. Speaking what you can do for Bosnia, I like always to say, whoever can. It would be a wonderful idea firstly to visit Bosnia, because despite all of these atrocities that took place during the 90s, Bosnia is a beautiful country, and it's worth visiting. I think also it would be important to connect with other Bosnians, and perhaps to work on with youth in Bosnia, and by doing that, you can meet a new culture as well, and also you can learn about genocide, but also what's important, that we all know that unfortunately peace is still fragile in Bosnia. Of course, I don't want to sound negative, and I'm always optimist. But also we need to be realist, because unfortunately at the moment in Bosnia there's a last stage or last step of genocide happening, which is genocide with denial. And there's a problem we have in Bosnia, because war criminals are being praised as war heroes, and their war crimes are being glorified. And obviously that's not good, especially in terms of establishing reconciliation amongst people. I still believe there's no doubt it's possible to live together. It is possible, and we as a Bosnian Muslims, we will always believe in this idea that we can live together. And that's a proof. If you visit Sarajevo, for example, it's a city where in the same time you can hear a church, you can hear a bell from Orthodox Church, from Catholic Church. You can hear adhan from a mosque. There's also a synagogue in Sarajevo. There's a Jewish community as well, who can understand Bosnians who suffered a lot during Second World War. So this idea is possible. Unfortunately, many young generations are being poisoned by hatred, and the nationalism, which nationalism and hatred didn't bring good to anyone. So it's important for everyone to be aware of this fact, and I still believe that Bosnia has a bright future. But we have to work hard. We have to work hard on that, and we all need to do whatever we can for the sake of the future generations. That something like that never happens again. And the theme of this year was that was launched by remembering Srebrenica was every action matters, and therefore we should do whatever we can to make sure that all innocent victims are never forgotten, and more importantly that something like that never happens again to anyone.
I appreciate that. Melissa, I wanted to bring you in. I think is your audio working?
Everything's fine now.
Excellent. Yeah, I wanted to bring you in on that point of genocide denial in particular, because I think you've talked about that, as well as some reports that can be shared. So what do we? I mean, what kind of background are the genocide deniers coming from, and what kind of tools do you use to challenge and kind of push back on that narrative?
Jeffrey Stanton, he stated that we have 10 phases of genocide. So the last one, according to him, is denial. Actually, that step began right after the war, when they started to move mass graves, bodies from one to second location to third location, so it can be harder to identify bodies and to hide those crimes they've done all over in Bosnia, not just in Srebrenica, but as well in Bosanska Krajina, that is the western, northwestern part of Bosnia. So now there are many scholars that they are introducing, and the 11th stage, it is the triumphalization, where they are celebrating the patriarchs, especially generals, You have near Sarajevo a student dormitory called Radovan Karadzic. So when you see something like that, that really need to be really need to be condemned by international community, by international publicity. So they don't feel that like they are doing something good, because they are convinced that they are doing something good, that they are celebrating their generals, and they are really convinced of it. So the first way we can, not just that, the other example is not readiness of international community to deal with the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially in Srebrenica, by giving the Nobel Prize to Peter Handke. He got the Nobel Prize, and he was one of the biggest apologists to Slobodan Milosevic and to his actions. And he even went to his funeral, and then the type of person got the Nobel Prize for literacy, and then they literature, and then they say something. It is not about his literature. It is separated from his personality. It is absurd. That is a clear sign that there is no will with the international community to deal with that in a normal way. Then what can people from UK? It was a question about that. What you can do? In my personal opinion, you can make a lot of media pressure. For example, the recent event about putting back in use the Hotel Vilna Vlas in Visegrad, where mass rapings and sexual harassments of women happened. They put it in TripAdvisor, and they put it like in normal use, so people can come, and it was really disgusting. I don't want to use any more.
So was this a venue where this happened and it's still operational?
Yes, and they put it now to be operational, so people can come and visit and to rest there, and some kind of pressure on Twitter comments, maybe some letters or comments to TripAdvisor or something like that. That shouldn't be done. And for example, other example is yesterday BBC. They were writing about massacre in Srebrenica, not genocide. So it is extremely important to use the correct narrative. It wasn't a massacre, it wasn't a crime, it was a genocide. In Srebrenica, it was a genocide that was recognized by international courts. So those are the things that people from their own homes can do. They can just send a mail, send something. We disagree with this. Please change that. Call that with a real name and things like that. Genocide denial report you were mentioning. That is something that Srebrenica Memorial Center issued in May of 2020, and those are facts about denying genocide, because that is according to this webpage, genocidewatch.net, you can visit as well. There is the surest indicator that genocide is going to happen again when you have the perpetrators who are denying that they have done it. So this is an alarm for people in Bosnia and people everywhere. People in Bosnia, unfortunately, weren't that educated. They couldn't see that all these things that they were doing and all that narrative that was talking, using their TV stations, radio stations, calling people with Turks and trying to separate us. That was all introduction to genocide. And we were naive enough, unfortunately, to trust them and to come to that safe zone, everyone in Srebrenica and other safe zones that were actually just, they weren't safe zones, as you can see. So we really need to be more wise and more educated about things that they are constantly happening. And if someone is saying, like a person who was studying genocide and who knows what he's talking about, the final phase of the genocide is denial, and it indicates that it could happen again. We need to be aware of that. Furthermore, he suggests that the best antidote for genocide is education. It's education, and it's teaching people to live in a to live and respect diversity. We Bosnians, Bosnian Muslims, you see the difference, Bosnian and Bosniak. Bosniak is a Bosnian Muslim. So we are not very welcome to come to Srebrenica, to come to some parts of Republic of Srpska. We cannot educate their children. But people from Great Britain wouldn't be observed as someone who is trying to tell them something. Maybe some of organizations from UK or from other Western countries, they would be more accepted to teach them about tolerance, to teach them about our shared values, common ground, our humanity, our human values that we share. So hopefully, inshallah, they would see that we are also people with families, with values, with dreams and hopes and everything that people, they have, not them exactly, because I'm talking about children of young people and about teaching young people and children. So they need to learn for someone that that we actually don't want to harm them, because unfortunately through history they were always teaching their children that they need to revenge to Turks in Bosnia, referring to Bosnian Muslims because we have done something very bad to them, and they need to revenge to us. So they are justifying the genocide they have done, and other I would say everything was a genocide, but it isn't politically correct if I say that, because of the only legitimized is this one in Srebrenica.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think one of the points that was mentioned, and I really like that view of we as outsiders might be in a better position to come in and educate people from the Serbian side. One of the things that's commonly advocated is visiting and viewing these sites to get a kind of insight of it. And a lot of people talk about the impact it has and how we can become agents for good. What actually what does the visit usually involve? What do people go and do? Are there any organizations that people can benefit during our trips to Bosnia, to Srebrenica, the memorial itself, and how do we support the local community when we go and do there, or when we go and visit there? Sorry. I think feel for. I mean, I think Mirza, this might apply to you. Might apply to Ahmed as well, from a community's perspective, and actually, when people from outside come and visit.
Who will talk now? May I?
Yeah. Please go for it, Ahmed.
First of all, I'm very happy that Melissa gives a very nice speech. Whatever I want to say, she said, and then it's very important for people from UK, from Europe, to come to Srebrenica, really, because you cannot describe such evil that happened here, really. You have to see that. You have to see. You have evidence everywhere in Srebrenica, especially in Memorial Center. So I can give you my help during your visit. I'm here. You have my contact. If you want to come to Srebrenica, we will make it that happen. And I offer you my help. I offer my help for everyone who wants to come here, and I'm very happy, and I'm very happy when I can talk with people that came from countries from Europe, from over the world, because a lot of people are coming here, really. In Srebrenica, people are here spending their times, their holidays. They are researching, they are learning, and that's the main point. That's the most important thing that could happen here for us, really. And when you came here, you have to prepare yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to watch some videos, and then you will understand better when you came.
Appreciate that, Mirsad. I think some of the things and tours that Remembering Srebrenica organize. Can you tell us a little bit about them? But also, what do those involve, and the potential impact they have both on the local community and the visitors themselves?
Remembering Srebrenica have organized so many tours to Bosnia, and it's very important that people from political life, from people who can influence who can make a good, a positive contribution. They visited Bosnia, like people like Prime Minister, MPs, and other politicians. I suppose that Najad had the opportunity to meet many of them who visited Srebrenica. Probably Ahmed. I'm not sure. So it's very important. So everyone who visits Srebrenica, he or she needs to take a pledge that we will do something when return to the UK, and that's very important. And that's why we had a, a lot of support. More than 1,000 events have been. It's important to let everyone know and to educate everyone what happened in Srebrenica. So this is the way how it works. It's important that this visit includes firstly visit to Sarajevo, which is shall we say kind of a bright side of Bosnia. And they visit War Tunnel, which was famous during the war because it was tunnel under the runway on the airport. And then there's visit to Srebrenica, which is for everyone, which is very moving. It is very emotional for everyone who sees this valley of white tombstones and tombstones. Everyone knows that innocent people were killed. That and no one can just be indifferent to this. So everyone who comes, who returns from Bosnia to the UK is got a totally different impression of Bosnia because it's a mixture of everything. We can say that Bosnia is a mixture of beauty, yes, but also it's there is this tragic past of whoever goes to Bosnia is motivated actually to work genocide in Bosnia because this is one of the best ways how to preserve memory of those who were killed in Bosnia. So that's why there are so many volunteers, thousands of them who work tirelessly and support this idea and this this way of honoring victims of genocide. And as I said before, and also it's important that we need to do our best that people who live in Bosnia that they feel safe and that they feel safe also for their children, for the future generations who will come. And this is responsibility for everyone to help as much as everyone can.
Jazakallah khair. Appreciate that, and I think again from our perspective, people in the UK or any other country, people who are tuning in or who are going to listen to this later on either YouTube or podcast, etc. This is something we really have a responsibility to get involved with. And one of the things is we said never forget about this, and that comes with a responsibility. Visiting, putting pressure online, getting involved with the media efforts, all of those are things that we can do and actively contribute in. You can also join the Remembering Srebrenica campaign and the organization. It's a UK-based charity. Their website is srebrenica.org.uk. You can also follow them on Twitter at Srebrenica UK. And of course, there are various projects that are happening that you can get involved with, various media initiatives. To our guests, I'd like to say thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming, sharing what are personal traumatic stories, and really appreciate the work that you're doing as well. It's very meaningful, it's very important, and as Muslims living in Europe, generally, this and as humans also, like, this is something that is very very close to our hearts, and it's something that you guys are carrying the mantle for all of us, that we really want to support you with. So we really appreciate you taking the time out to come and speak, especially since it's such a busy time for all of you guys. So really, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much for your time, and we really appreciate the input that you guys gave us. You can catch up with this on our socials on Mab Youth, or you can listen to it on the Middle West podcast if you want to catch up. We'll also be sending out some things and putting some things on Facebook, such as a report that you can read and kind of engage deeper with this. A few members of Mab have tried to engage by putting things on Medium and other websites. So hopefully the struggle continues, and I hope for most of our listeners that you can use this as a stepping stone, an opportunity to learn more, and hopefully we can all go and visit Bosnia ourselves and see the manifestations of the trauma that was caused. With that, sorry.
Before you finish, I would like just not to leave this in a way that we are talking about whole nation of Serbs, or entire people of Serbs, or Croats, or people, or international community. There are very few. There are a lot of good examples of people who didn't, who actually helped the Bosnian Muslims to from the international community, from the Croatian side, from Serb side. We are not generalizing all the people. It is extremely important to know that there are we can say that we have extremists and moderate people. So we are always, and those moderates in all of these groups of ethnicities here that living, we can always find some common ground and to help to bring as much as we can of these extremists who are not willing to work on together a future. The idea of Bosnia that had Ali Izetbegovic. So I don't want just that you have the feeling that we do not have any friends among those people. We do have friends, and there are hope that we can build together future together here in Bosnia.
Oh, thank you very much. Really, yes, definitely. And this is, I mean, again, you have friends in the Bosnians have a friend in the organizations in the UK, especially with MAB and MAB Youth, the Muslim Association of Britain, and all the projects that we do that are about driving positive change and making sure that Muslims contribute to the wider society. One of those is definitely raising awareness of Bosnia and the genocide that happened, alongside kind of the regular charitable projects that we do. So I really appreciate the guests coming in. I really appreciate the attendees who tuned in, as well as our listeners from later. Thank you very much, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all.
Welcome, salam.
Salam, thank you.